Coming up on Stow Nation, I have the full rip kit on mine. If they drive the beast through the same course and then they drive mine through the same course, are they going to tell a difference, do you think?
They probably would notice a slight difference. But if you're in an isolated situation, side by side, they'd have to see it side by side comparison. You would see a difference. Most people that come in with the beast will do like an upgrade for them. Like, you know, they'll be like, what more can I do? Well, on the front suspension, we can add the auxiliary shock in there. Mm-hmm. And they do notice an improvement.
Do they? Welcome to another episode of Stow Nation, a production of Park Media. Before I introduce today's guest, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, share, and leave a 5-star review. And if you find this podcast useful in any way and want to pay us the ultimate compliment, head on over to our Patreon page where you can subscribe to be a Classic, Stealth, or Beast Mode subscriber. Welcome back to another episode of Stow Nation. This episode is the second and last part of a mini-series about suspension. If you didn't check out last week's episode with Van Compass, you should, because it's jam-packed full of technical information that will help inform you to make the best decision when it comes to buying your suspension kit. I'd like to state that I really don't think you can go wrong with either Van Compass or Agile's Rip Kit. Both are fantastic suspensions that have great engineering behind them, and both are massive improvement over the stock suspension. And the last note before we begin is Agile requested to redo the podcast from the one that we recorded in Flagstaff during the Overland Expo during Storyteller's big 2022 features release. There was a number of reasons why, but I obliged to the request for reasons stated in the episode. And I'm glad that we did re-record because we got to know John on a more intimate level by talking about the genesis of Agile and even talking about one of his good friends and co-founder who passed away. This is a great episode that covers a lot of information to include updates about their new locker that they're R&Ding with ARB right now. So please sit back, relax, and welcome John and Elikem and the entire Agile team to the Stow Nation family. John and Elikem, thanks for coming on to Stow Nation. Before I begin this podcast, I'm probably going to get some questions about why we are redoing this podcast because there were a lot of people that were watching us live over in Flagstaff. And so, long story short, I agreed to redo this podcast because you basically have some updates. And I felt like the biggest thing is that we're kind of on a time crunch because the sun was setting. And then we all know what happens when the sun goes down. The party happens. And plus, it was just a really loud background anyways. And so I want to go ahead and give you guys a second shot and talk about more in depth without having that time crunch. So, and if you don't know, if you're not watching the YouTube version, right now I am sitting in Agile's shop right now. And it's pretty nice. I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bays. So, and then you guys are expanding, which you guys, I'm sure you'll talk about that. But anyways, yeah, so let's just go ahead and start from the beginning, John. Like literally. How did you guys, how did Agile form?
So Agile was the founder of Agile Off-Road is a good friend of mine named Ramsey, Elwardani. He and we raced back in the 90s off-road racing for years, and we became like best friends. We were inseparable for a long time. And then as we grew up, we got older, I got married, had kid. He did the same. We just grew apart, and he was getting remarried, and his wife wanted a van to go off-road and explore Baja. So he was out looking for vans, and all the vans that he saw were Ford vans, Quigley suspension, straight axles, and he goes, I could build a better one. And if you know Ramsey, he could build a better one. He was pretty persistent guy. And he was, at the time, he was with Glenn Stradoff in a shop. They were fabbing parts and racing off-road and having a good time. One thing that Ramsey was really good at. And they decided, they built this van. And then he started posting on some forums that he's building this van, and the next thing you know, it kind of blew up. And he was getting all these inquiries for building these vans. And he took a Ford E350 250 or 350 and put a twin traction beam Dana 50 in it. It's pretty elaborate, pretty neat and has a ton of wheel travel, and it works really well off-road. And that's when he got into the vans. And it was a hobby. And then he kept on coming to me. I was at the time, I think I was at Fox, and he was saying, you need to come and help me with this business, and I think there's something there. And there's something there, and we just kept going and going and going. Years went by, and then he finally convinced me to leave Fox, and he was telling me, hey, there's this new Sprinter out, and he bought one. And he and Glenn had been converting this Sprinter two-wheel drive into a four-wheel drive. And they were probably about 60-70% of the way through it when I came on board. And a gentleman that I knew and met through Fox, which was Cease which became Rome-Built. He showed up he literally drove into our parking lot, and he had a four-wheel drive Sprinter. And that was like 2016.
Yeah. Cease came right about then.
Yeah, and
May 31st.
Yeah, and he said, I want to do the shocks and make the suspension better. And we were like, we'd done some stuff with two-wheel drives with the rip kit on a two-wheel drive. In the four-wheel drive, we'd pretty much had kind of slowed way down on it. We were doing the Fords, and we were doing two-wheel drive Sprinters. And then Cease came in, and we modified a two-wheel drive, and he gave us the van for a week. And we built custom springs, we built custom everything for it, and we modified the two-wheel drive to work on it. And
What year was this?
2016.
2016.
May.
So he had one of the first vans in, and then his was unique. He had these big fenders on it. He bought them from somebody over in Europe. And so he had these he had pretty big tires on it stock. They were like 34s or something. And it was a neat looking van. And he built it out. And then that same year, we took our two-wheel drive van with the rip kit to Overland Expo. And I think we displayed it. We had it on display because we had a bunch of Illuminous product on it. We had it at Illuminous's booth, and they allowed us to put in like a little thing that showed the shock on it and cards. And then I had my Ford van in Fox's booth that year, and we just kind of hung out and looked around. And then Cease had his van. He opened up his business, Rome-Built, I think that year.
Oh, wow.
And he just showed up, and he's like, and we were just like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm going to start selling van parts. And we're like, okay, cool. So it was, kind of interesting. And there was a lot of interest there in the Sprinters over the years. And, Ramsey had always pushed me to be like, the reason why you're coming on board is that we're going to do this. We're going to continue to do the Ford vans, and then we'll transition into these Sprinters. Because at that time, Ford hadn't produced Sprinters since Ford hadn't built a Ford E350, 250 since 2014. So, and Sportsmobile was the guys. They were doing four-wheel drive Ford vans. In the early years, they took Quigleys, and they would modify them into four-wheel drives, and then they'd do the interior. And we actually made a kit for the Quigley van. So we have a rip kit for a Quigley. And that came up after we did the TTBs, after we did the four-wheel drives, because people were dying to get better handling vans. And we were able to do that with the Fox shocks and changing out the springs, things like that. And Sportsmobile was only building V10s, 7.3s, and 6 liters. They always had big vans. And if a customer brought us a two-wheel drive, it generally had a 5.4 in it, and we would put the twin traction beam in it. But then Sportsmobile was transitioning into Sprinters at that time. And so all these customers that were Sportsmobile customers that were coming to us for suspension were now coming to us for suspension for the Sprinter. And Sportsmobile wasn't doing anything. They'd be like, yeah, go see those guys. They know what they're doing. And we just started doing them. And we just started doing like full builds. And it was just like, it just kind of took off. And I'd say 90% of what we would work on were Sportsmobiles. They'd come right down from Sportsmobile. Sometimes they'd ship them. Sometimes customers would drive them down. Sometimes they'd wait a little bit, and we'd outfit them. And then other people just were doing a lot of home builds at that time. And then I think the next year at like Overland Expo, there were more van guys showing up. And I think Turag, John at Nomad Vans, they all became friends, and they saw what we were doing, and they liked what we were doing, and then they started putting them on all their vans. So that's kind of like the timeline of how everything went. And then other companies started getting into it, Winnebago, and then obviously Storyteller, and it's kind of where it's progressed. And then over the years we've fine-tuned things, but every customer that would come to us with something, they'd come to us with like an adequate problem. They'd be like, I drive this thing, I run out of gas. I don't want to carry a bunch of fuel. It sucks. It smells. I pour it in. And I remember Jesus working with a guy. We had these fuel systems that we were buying from a guy up in LA, and they were saddle tanks that went on either side of the Sprinter. And they were fine, but a lot of times they were where the batteries were on a Sportsmobile or a gray water tank. So you couldn't put them there. And then this guy goes, there's got to be a better way. Put one where the spares. And, it wasn't that easy. It's just never that easy. And over the years, this guy kept pushing us, and he worked with Jesus for a long time, and we developed a transfer system. And all these were like things that customers wanted. They were things that customers needed. They needed better handling bands, better suspension, better armor underneath, whatever it was, and then fuel, things like that. Mm-hmm. So it was cool working with everybody. And then we moved over here to this shop in
2018 February is when we moved over here.
So we were in this like really small shop. Like you could see actually van owners come in and like check us out and be like, "Are you guys legit?" Because we were running out of like 4 bays in the end of this building, and we would not park a van outside. It wasn't like a terrible neighborhood, but the chance of a battery getting stolen out of it was
still in San Diego?
Pretty high. Yeah, this was in El Cajon, in Greenfield.
Oh, okay.
It was actually called Bostonia. Mm-hmm. It's a weird part of El Cajon. It actually has a lower tax rate than anywhere. So we were like a block away. It would cost you, I don't know, 0.75% more.
Oh, wow.
If we were a block away.
That's crazy.
So when we, like I said, these people would come in and they'd kind of check you out and be like, well, here's the shop. They'd look around, they'd see what we're doing, and they're like, okay, all right, you guys are legit. And we'd say, we're parking your van inside. And matter of fact, I would leave my van there if we didn't have parking for a customer, I'd drive the customers home.
Oh, wow.
So, but everything worked out well. It was juggling cars all the time, picking up people at airports and leaving cars at my house for weeks when they couldn't pick up their van, so we had storage. Then we came here, and this has big bullpen in the back. Mm-hmm. When we came onto this side, so we only had probably a third of this building when we moved in, which was about 5,000 feet.
Oh, wow.
So when we first moved here, it was just the other half over here. It's pretty shallow, and so we would pull vans in, do work on them. We had 2 lifts, I think. Yeah, we had 2 lifts.
Yeah,
the one in the back, the one here. They were sketchy. You pick up a 10,000-pound Sportsmobile or Quigley or Sprinter for that fact. It was sketchy.
Please, not today.
So a lot of the work was done on the ground, which we were fine with. So we'd pull vans in every day, or we'd work on them we'd work here a lot. We worked a lot.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So when we
you're
first
working a lot now, so
yeah, we worked twice as much then. So I mean, at the old shop we would work. You'd come in the morning, you'd help customers in the morning, check them in. You had a little office. Glenn would start work, and I'd start ordering parts, bringing in parts, and you couldn't even answer emails or phones. And then you just return all the calls at night, answer emails at night before you went to bed. Get up in the morning, do the same thing before you came in here, into the old shop, and then it started all over. Unfortunately, through all this, when we first came up in 2016, when we first opened, there were 3 of us. There was Glenn working in the shop, myself, and Ramsey.
So the three of you are the founders of Agile.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Ramsey's Ramsey's the guy that named it, and I would say who's the visionary that really kind of foresaw everything. I mean, he's trying to convert a van back in, 2013 to a four-wheel drive Sprinter.
Yeah.
Pretty forward thinking.
Where is he now?
He's dead.
Oh, shit.
So
I'm sorry.
So yeah. So remember when you guys went down and saw the memorial in San Felipe?
Oh, that was his?
So that's his.
Oh.
Yeah. So he was like this real creative guy. He wanted to have fun, and he did not want to work. And he made that clear. Like when I came in, he's like, hey, if this doesn't work out, you can do your Jeeps and you can do your trucks, which I was really into Jeeps and trucks at the time. And I wouldn't say that'd be easy business, but we knew there'd be business in it. He goes, if the van thing doesn't happen, because you could see he was selling me on it. He's like selling me, but he really didn't know. And, I'll never forget, it was, he was heading to Mexico one time, and this was, I think, maybe a week before he passed away. And we're driving around, and he would drive around and pick up parts. He loved doing it. He loved talking with people and getting the parts, and it was a big waste of time. I brought in a lot of, let's not go and pick up parts. Let's have the drivers bring them and give them a credit card. But, we're driving around and picking up parts, and he just looks at me and he goes, man, I had no idea. I go, what do you mean you have no idea? And he's like, I had no idea that it would go this well. And this was probably 5 months, 6 months into the business, and he hadn't been really there a lot. He had a place down in Todos Santos, which is down in Baja. He and his wife had just bought the place. They'd go down there, they'd fly down there and hang out. And that's kind of what he wanted to do, Mm-hmm. And then he goes, I'll answer emails and I'll go to the forums. And back then there was forums. There was, what were the forums? Sportsmobile forum and...
Like some off-road.
I remember seeing Sprinter Source on there because I still see a lot of Ramsey's posts are still revered on there.
The other one where he got in all the... Well, there was Pirate 4x4. There's some epic ones on Pirate 4x4 that he would make people mad. But I'm trying to think of the other one. There was another big one, like all the expedition vehicles. Expedition Portal.
Oh, yeah. I was a part of that.
Yeah. He was on there a lot. And now everything's gone to more Facebook groups, right?
Yeah.
So he wanted to be that guy and on all those and just sit in his underwear at home and in Baja.
Yeah, right.
Live the life.
Mai Tai.
Yeah. So unfortunately, one day he left the shop. I remember he left on a Friday, and he told Glenn, he goes, hey, I'm going to leave the van here. I'll come by in the morning, pick it up, and run to the airport. We're going to go to Mexico. He goes, I'm going to go down there for a week, and I'm going to meet Mike. God, I'm picturing the guy. The guy's first name was Mike, but he had a Ford van. They're going to meet him in Scorpion Bay. So it would have been a long drive from his house to Scorpion Bay. And he said, hey, he goes, I'm going to be down there for a week. When we come up, let's get all this stuff done. He goes, I think he wanted to really engage himself back in the business a little bit. And I get a call Sunday morning from his best friend. And I went, shit, he's been in an accident. Going through, I knew that I'm just going shit, we're going to have to go down and get him. He's in an accident. And he just said, no, Ramsey passed.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So he passed of a heart attack in Todos Santos, and things changed. It really changed.
It's okay, you can take a second.
So for me, I felt devastated in, looking at it now, I thought about it more as the business, kind of like shit, now we're kind of screwed. Mm-hmm. This is our business, what are we going to do? And not only losing your, good friend. So, we after that went about, things kind of we went back to normal. Business was kind of as normal because Ramsey originally hadn't been that involved in those months leading up to his death. I always told him, I go, we're either going to do really, really well or we're going to kill each other, And so soon after he passed, immediately I called up a friend of mine, Jesus Hernandez. I go, hey, I need help. And Jesus had actually worked for Ramsey. When Ramsey was trying to do the business, he was working with Glenn in the shop, and he needed somebody to come in and help him, and I recommended Jesus. So Jesus came in, helped out Ramsey, and at this time he came in and helped out me. And Jesus and I were great friends, good friends. We did a lot of things together. He helped me in, remodel my kitchen and all kinds of stuff. And we had worked at an off-road center here in town for years. And he came from super shops. And so I go, he'd be a good fit. And I go, why don't you come in? And he was looking for, we bring him in as a partner. And so he was fortunate enough to buy out Ramsey shares. And so at that point it was Jesus, Glenn, myself. I think we had one shop tech at that time. And then when we came over here, just kept going along, got busier and busier, and then COVID hit.
Oh, yeah. Say no more.
Yeah. Well, and so we had 1 week where the phones went ring, emails stopped going, and then the next week, we would get people pissed off because we couldn't, there was physically no way we could answer that many phone calls in a day.
Yeah.
And then emails, same thing, so we got behind. Now we've got a great group. We've got, how many in the office now?
I think we have 25 people. 25 people total in here now.
Wow.
Yeah.
3 to 25.
Yeah. And so we got a bunch of guys answering the phone calls, answering the emails. I think we're caught up on all that. Mm-hmm. Right, Jesus? Yeah.
So if you don't know, Jesus is standing behind the camera.
He's camera shy.
Well, the whole thing that I really like about that story is that I think people that are just coming into the Sprinter business and buying Winnebago Revels and the Storyteller and whatever other brand, a 4x4 Sprinter out there, is that they come in and they see Agile. It's a big company. It's like one of the meccas to come. Because I remember when I got my Storyteller, I came here. It was like one of my first stops. I called it the California Mod Tour. And I got tons of stuff done, and I was so happy. But what I didn't know, and I'm sure that other people can kind of resonate with this, is that I didn't understand the story and the background of what this company is founded on. And so I think what I really like about your story is that it just highlights the fact that you started from basically like a 2-bay garage busting your ass, mm-hmm. and then now you're employing 25 people. You have 6 bays. You got the other section of the building, and you're expanding, and you're literally making people's dreams come true. And I think that's something that needs to be recognized. So I appreciate that story.
That's great. Yeah, I think that we grew at it was perfect timing for us, because at the time there was hardly anybody doing it, and it was fun. It was a lot of work. We enjoyed the work, and when I left my last job at Fox, I was doing well there, and never thought. I figured we're going to go and hang out and build vans in the garage, build a few vans here and there, and then maybe do some Jeeps here and there, and do some other fun stuff. And yeah, it's been great.
It's almost like the equivalent of Steve Jobs starting in your garage. Yeah. Well, maybe not that.
Maybe not that good.
I'm reaching. I understand.
Reaching far. Yeah, but we were definitely pushed by clients and customers for the need for what they wanted. Longer range. We did a van for Greg Long, who's a big wave surfer here, and he had like a long range fuel tank, and he would just drive to Mexico. Mm-hmm. Drive to Mexico, and I think we even made we also do some funky stuff at that time for people. He wanted a hitch mounted somewhere, so that on the back end or the inside of his van or something for winching a ski.
Oh, wow.
In and out of the water when he's down there.
That's pretty cool.
So we had some, it's different stuff, but primarily anything that we were doing was kind of made sense. And we looked at it as, well, this makes sense for you, it might make sense for other people. And then let's just, not so much mass produce it as like, well, let's like recreate it. And then like Jesus can't leave nothing alone. He's got to make it better and better, whether it's, from the hardware to the fitting. I mean, he's still working on his Nova that he bought when he was a teenager.
Oh, wow.
Right?
That's pretty cool.
So he keeps on taking it apart and putting it back together with new parts. So a lot of stuff that we have, Glenn and Jesus had their hands on, myself, and sometimes just other shop techs, they'd come in and they go, hey, this is way better if we don't have to do this all the time. So then we'd redesign a part to where it would fit easier, install better.
That's awesome.
Things like that.
So how did the relationship between you and Storyteller begin?
So at one point, the guys from La Mesa RV were up here, and they just like popped into the parking lot, and the guy looks at me, and we just started talking, and he goes, oh, are you the owner? And I go, yeah, I'm one of the owners here. And so we just started talking, and he goes, well, we think that there's a market for this. And we're like, yeah, no kidding. Right?
You think?
But we were like, okay, so what's, and oftentimes dealers in the industries that we've been in, you kind of watch it, right? But they came in, and we did we started doing a bunch of wheel and tire packages for them, and just kind of outfitting vans so that when they came there, they didn't find the same van that they'd find at another dealership. And then they brought up a Storyteller, and we were like, oh, cool. We'd never, I think it was pretty much, what year was that?
It was 2020, beginning of the year.
Yeah. So, it was a white one, kind of the white
classic.
Standard, the classic, right? So, and then they brought us like one or two of them. We outfitted them. Originally we wanted to like take them and like, we wanted to black them out. We called them Californiaize them,
Oh yeah.
Because
like murder them out.
Yeah, well, kind of, just kind of give them a different touch. We would do that with pleasure waves. Like people with pleasure waves come in, and they've got like, I'd call them the old man flares and stuff like that, and they were RVs. They looked like RVs. And these, white modes, they were neat, and they had the bright stripes on them. We didn't change any of that, but we just started outfitting them and just doing simple things. Wheel and tires. I think even before that, we had, in early 2019, Glenn had made the little mini fenders. I called them mini fenders at the time, but now we call them no rubs. They're the ones that Terrawagon has. So we actually made the first set, and Glenn made them out of metal. He would take, because we used to do that on the Fords, so we took and cut a V shape in there and made them out of metal, and then we made fiberglass molds, and we sold so many of those fiberglass I still call them mini fenders, but these mini fenders for the 2019, and that really needed to be installed. So I think we were doing fiberglass ones at that time. This was before Terrawagon had them, so we'd been doing them for a fair amount of time, because we're literally from beginning of 2019. So they would bring them in here, we do all this stuff, and then the guys at Jeffrey and Lee, I met them. I think it was just maybe like a phone call or in person, and they just kind of just started chatting and seeing what we're doing, and then they kind of said, hey, this is cool, because they'd have these like different packages, and they were like, at that point you could see like either the light was on or the light had already been on, and they were going to create the stealth mode, because I mean literally you'd put like a black emblem on these and wrap the hood and change out the wheels. It's a totally different looking van.
Sure.
Just simple stuff, right? And so they went obviously further when they did the stealth, and then they did the Beast, and then they wanted a more aggressive stance with the Beast and better suspension, and we kind of settled on our rip kit with the Coney shock, and I think we sent them prototypes soon after we met them, like literally soon after, and I think there were some tuning variations on the rear shocks, and that was kind of about it. And then we did the onboard air kits with them. We do our onboard air. And then we still sell them the mini fenders or the no rub fenders, and it's kind of where it went.
So why is it that with the Beast that it doesn't come with that coil in the front, but when you come here and you get the rip kit done, it comes with the coil?
You mean the shock?
Or shock.
So,
Yes.
so that, at that time, a lot of what we do, I'm going to say, is a little bit more technical. You don't just like unbolt a shock and you bolt it on with what we're doing. And in the case of our auxiliary shock, it's not an easy install. I'm not saying they were looking for an easy way, but I kind of pushed them to say, I don't know if you want to do this. There's a lot of overhead in this. Overhead meaning extra time, potential for drilling into something incorrectly, just something that they really didn't need to mess with. And so I probably had talked them out of it more so in saying that because we were also having supply problems from day one from everybody. It's just gotten terribly worse.
Right.
But getting shocks from a large manufacturer like Fox, and when they're proprietary shocks like what we have built, they take a while. We order them a year in advance, and if they don't make their dates, we're screwed.
Right.
So, so that would happen a lot, and then, just them not having to go in and drill it, mount it. It became less technical work for their technicians there. That's kind of where it came from.
So on a technical side, what's the big difference without having those there compared to a rip kit that does?
So in the case of an aftermarket auxiliary shock, there's two brands out there. There's the Van Compass and there's ours. And we sold the Van Compass for many years. But when we had found out that, we're old school off-road guys. And by old school, we're talking before, bypass shocks. And what that means is you would make the shock progressive or do its work in the location where the shock is. So as the shock's going up and down in the front of a Sprinter, you want to maximize the travel that it is. And with the Van Compass ones, we had like 3 inches of travel out of a 5-inch shock. So one day we had a customer leave us a Sprinter, and he goes, you can do whatever you want with it, I don't care. And we took it apart. We took the whole front end out of it. And Glenn designed a shock because he was a fabrication guy, building race cars with Ramsey and in this little shop in El Cajon. And we maximized the travel, so we maximized it to 5 inches. So, and it's a pain to do. It's really, really difficult. You got to move the sway bar, and it's not just like I said, it's just not like bolting on a shock. When you bolt something on that doesn't have that much effectiveness, usually it's because it's an easier install. So, Glenn is not known for making something that is he's like custom. You come into a shop, he'd build you something custom, and it would be this, Ford Ranger that would have a ton of wheel travel. He probably could never duplicate it on another vehicle because he built it off this a one-off vehicle. But in this case, we were able to duplicate it, and we've been good ever since. But keep in mind that the strut strokes 7 inches, and our auxiliary shock strokes 5 inches. Van Compass strokes 3 inches.
What does that mean for people that don't know what that means?
What that means is that your ratio, as the wheel's traveling, you can maximize that ratio. If you have more travel or more stroke in the shock, it's working harder. So in the case of an off-road car, they'd make like a suspension that would be a secondary, let's say the shock would kick in at a later time. That means the shock was like laying down, and it had to really go into a deep hole to where it would engage the second shock and make it more work on its 1-to-1 ratio. So you'd look at an old school race car to have 3 shocks on there. One of them's 1-to-1 or close to 1-to-1. The other one's laid over a little bit more, and its ratio kicks in it starts kicking in later as it hits a bigger hole. And then the third shock really needs to be in a deep, deep hole. So it's more about when you're going over the small bumps, you have less shock, and this is for racing, because in a van you want to keep your suspension pretty tight throughout the whole. As you're driving down a road, you really don't want a sloppy suspension. You're rolling around on the freeway and stuff like that. You get caught in the crosswinds. You really don't want that type of a progressive suspension. So basically what that means is the strut maximizes the tuning because it has a better motion ratio, you know.
Okay.
So and then the auxiliary shock is a little helper.
Okay, so going back to my original question, someone who buys a Beast won't, and then go, like, I have the full rip kit on mine. If they drive the Beast through the same course, and then they drive mine through the same course, are they going to tell a difference, do you think?
They probably would notice a slight difference, especially if they had their van. Like, people become intimate with their vans, and like when people leave here and they drive around, they're like, oh, this is great, you know, it made a difference. But then they drive it at home where they're normally used to driving, like they're pulling into the Home Depot parking lot and they want to hit it at speed, you know, and they're picking up their flowers or whatever. Yeah. And so they're very familiar with that bump, and all of a sudden they're like, wow, I can take this like twice as fast as I used to be able to. So, but if you're in an isolated situation, side by side, they'd have to see it side by side comparison. You would see a difference. Most people that come in with the Beast will do like an upgrade for them. Like, you know, they'll be like, what more can I do? Well, on the front suspension, we can add the auxiliary shock in there. And they do notice an improvement.
Do they? Okay.
But in the other way, if they didn't have a Beast, if they had just a stock Sprinter with an auxiliary shock kit on it, you put a Coney or a Bilstein strut on it, they notice a huge difference. It's significant.
Okay.
So the other way, it's a far, like if you were to have your Sprinter and you had stock struts with auxiliary shocks on it, and there was a Beast with Coneys on it, the Beast will probably perform it. But then put the Coney on your vehicle, you'd be like, yeah,
No,
right.
nightmare.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. So you get bigger bang for your buck with the strut.
So you mentioned that you basically talked them out of putting that on the front, the shock.
Yeah, I don't know if I did, but we talked about it.
Loosely
Yeah.
speaking, but
Yeah.
I guess the question is there any plans to add that now? Now that Storyteller has been in business, they're coming out with a third year, you know.
You'd have to talk to them.
Okay,
But,
I didn't know if you guys were talking about that.
Yeah, we've talked about some suspension upgrades, and as those come about, when those opportunities come up, they're definitely need to know people.
Yeah, for sure. And then, well, the other question that I have that we didn't get to talk about in Flagstaff, and that was my fault because I'm the host and I just did a brain dump, but the Mode LT is coming out for Storyteller. So I talked to Quigley and I've talked to some other vendors, and from my understanding, you can't do a whole lot with the Ford chassis for whatever reason. But I know people are working on it, so I'm curious, what can you guys offer, and what are you guys working on for the Ford chassis?
So we're doing basically a rip kit for it. We should have a replacement spring. We'll probably, once we get the LT in here, we'll get weights on it. Maybe even design a spring specifically for it, unless we might have something already. We've already gotten in some prototypes sets, and then we turned them into, okay, let's order in more. And then we started installing them, and they've worked out really, really well in the Fords. So whenever you replace a spring, a complete spring in a van, especially if you're removing a spacer. So like the Sprinters have spacers, and then if you're putting a lift kit on a Transit, people are putting in a block. If we can eliminate that block, you want to bring the center line of the spring closer to the center line of the axle. And if you can do that, you're improving the geometry. You talk to anybody in suspension, anybody in springs, they're going to tell you that's the way to do it. You know, blocks is just a way of lifting a vehicle. It's a spacer, commonly used. You know, Mercedes uses them, Ford uses them. We even use them on our 250 kits, but the ultimate was to replace the spring. So we'll have that for the LT, and we have a rip for the front. We have our custom tuned Fox shocks for the rear. We do offer some off-the-shelf Bilstein shocks and struts for them too.
So the performance that we get from the rip kit on the Mercedes, will it be equivalent on the Ford chassis? Or will it be kind of, because it's an all-wheel drive, will it be kind of different?
I mean, I would say that the transits that we've been doing now that are not all-wheel drive, they've been two-wheel drive. They're a significant improvement, especially in the heavier ones. Keep in mind, a lot of transits that are being built, depends on how they're built out. The heavier the van, the bigger the improvement they'll see. We can really kind of firm those up.
Gotcha.
You know.
Okay. And what do you guys have to say about the whole debate of the Agile Rip Kit versus Van Compass 4.3s?
Yeah, you know, I mean, there's enough room out there for everybody. If they have a product that people like, that's fine. I mean, the debate, there's debates, and all I can tell is this is what we do. This is why we do it. It works. It makes sense. How the competition's doing it. We keep an eye on it, but we're not going to dwell on it.
Right.
And in the case of a properly tuned shock, you will not need to adjust. A properly tuned suspension, and people are like, "Whoa, what if I'm carrying a moto on the back of my Sprinter?" Or you're so heavy as it is. 300 extra pounds is not that big of a deal. Now, if you had, a really light passenger van that had no weight in it, and then you carried a crap load of blocks in the back to the that you're picking up at Home Depot, maybe that makes sense. You go underneath and you dial up to stiffen up your suspension. But shocks are dampeners. They do not generate spring force. So replacing and getting the right tuned suspension, increasing your spring force, especially increasing your spring force at ride height, makes significant improvements.
Gotcha. So basically, I kind of take out of that, it's like the old debate of Chevy versus Ford kind of thing. So
it could be. Yeah, you're going to have fans. I mean, they have their fans. We have our fans. And when I was at Fox, we had the same thing. What's the difference between Fox and King? And we'd be like, we have no idea. Like, we were not buying their shocks and taking them apart and go, here you go. Yeah. Here's the race wins. Here's the technology we're doing. They may have the same. But we would always say, this is what we're doing, this is the direction we're going, And so the direction we're going here, Fox is our partner. We're developing, we developed 2.5 shocks for Sprinters. I sent you a picture. I put the date on it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just so you know. I forget when it was. It was like 2018. So John Marking, who's in the Off-Road Hall of Fame, helped design Sprinter shocks for 3500s. This guy's like, he's an icon in motorsports off-road racing, and he helped develop shocks for a Sprinter. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is pretty
cool. And we did that 2.5 shocks long before anybody else did. I even sent you a picture of a prototype strut. I think I put a date on it too, but that we didn't. They're not available. They're not here, but. Again, these were forward-thinking things that we'd work with a company like Fox, and for whatever reason, they didn't pan out. They just didn't pan out, but there will be more coming, for sure.
Cool.
So.
And to piggyback off that, I would say just for people that are kind of looking to do an apples to apples comparison. I mean, I'm a avid auto enthusiast. I'm gonna comparison and cross shop left and right is. I mean, just pay attention to what comes with each kit to kind of help you make your decision. I mean, for us, the Rip Kit's the kit, and it consists of shocks and springs. So you get a custom rear leaf spring, custom tuned rear shock, either getting a upgraded strut and or the auxiliary shock, and then the coil that we put on the front. So each corner is getting an upgraded spring and an upgraded shock versus another kit which is just going to be shocks. And so, like John was saying, the shocks don't do the job of the spring. Shocks, no matter what tune or what you do to them, can't generate more spring force, and that's the biggest issue with these vans. Is you take a van, you add 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 pounds to it, the springs are overloaded as well as the shocks. So that's why we replace both.
That makes sense.
Have you weighed your van?
I'm scared to. I know I'm over 10K. I just don't want to know if I'm pushing 11K.
Yeah, we especially people that live in them, because you guys find all the little cubbies and you put you nest little things in there.
Well, going down to Baja, I had a full tank, or I had just over 3/4 in the auxiliary fuel tank. Had a full, tank of diesel. I had a full tank of water, and I had all my stuff, and I could tell a difference. And it was funny because I was following Paul Pritz. I think you guys know who he is down there, and he would just take off and boom, and I'm just like little granny, like barely speeding up. And I finally had to get on the radio. I was like, "Hey man, can you slow up when you come off the line?" He's like, "Huh?" He's like, "Oh, I had my pedal box thingy on." I was like, "Yeah, well, I'm probably pushing like 11K back here, so."
And they're not too aerodynamic either, right?
No. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's for sure. And then I have my Pelican boxes on top, which, I'm trying to go from 10 miles.
You look legit, though.
It looks beefy, for sure.
It looks beefy.
Yeah. But, anyways, but I totally get it. But, Elikem, I know that you had some more stuff that you wanted to talk about other than just suspension.
Yeah. We're constantly coming up with new products based on customer needs. I think John hit on the fuel tanks earlier. Since this is a Storyteller specific podcast, I feel like we should talk about some of the things that we can put specifically on the Storyteller. Fuel tank wise, I mean, we make quite a few of them. I think we have 4 or 5, maybe 6 of them available. But specifically for the Storyteller, you've got the 28-gallon fuel tank, which goes in the rear, so that replaces goes where the spare tire is mounted, so that's normally gets relocated to the door. We also have the replacement fuel tank, which is a 48-gallon ACGB tank.
What does that mean?
So instead,
why is it so big?
So instead
that one's difficult to put in the
Storyteller.
Yeah.
I'm not just bringing that one up because it has been asked about actually in the Storyteller forums. Is it's possible? So instead of having 2 tanks on the vehicle, just pull out the factory tank, and this replacement one is basically twice as wide, goes all the way out to the edge of the body.
There's the new one where the guys just wearing here the SMB tank.
What is
they have
SMB?
They have a replacement tank. It's a company up in.
Oh, that's the brand. SMB.
That's the brand, yeah.
Okay,
SMB
gotcha.
tank. They're originally were SMB filters. They make a poly tank that's going to replace the factory tank, which is about 47 gallons. It's pretty big. It's really long. It comes further forward and further back. It also drops down a little bit more than the factory tank. I don't foresee that being too much of a problem. But that replacement tank's available. We've done transfer tanks which mount onto the passenger side. So we've done a transfer tank that will fit on the passenger side between the step and the we'll call it the frame on the passenger side. That's like about 14 gallons.
Okay, so and you can do that on a Storyteller?
Do that on the Storyteller.
So you can get a 28 or 14-gallon tank.
Yeah, transfer tank. Yeah, and they're roughly about the same price. The 14 gallons a little bit more custom, and we do order them in as needed. And then the new replacement 47-gallon that's yet to be fitted in a Storyteller right now, but it looks promising. If not, I'm sure there can be some small modifications done.
Kind of the big thing that I'm automatically thinking about, like a big long 48-gallon tank, is if it's on a decline or incline, all that fuel is going to be on one end or the other. Yeah, that can't be that great.
It's yet to be seen, but there's like internal baffles. They're really just like valleys where the fuel will sit. There could be a possibility, but you'd have to be in a possibly pretty good incline. But the way that the pickup's designed inside of the Sprinter, the way that it works, the actual sending unit in there's like a sump. Is that the best way to call it? Be a sump in there that holds fuel, so that it's going to pick up all the way to the very end. Oh, okay. But I could see where if you were maybe sitting the thing, parking on like a steep incline overnight, wake up in the morning.
Well, I just imagine like since it's becoming winter, all the snow bunnies going up on the mountains, parking, leaving their heaters on, because a heater cuts off at 1/4 of a tank. So if it's on some type of incline, decline, it might fool the S-bar a little bit. So that's all I'm thinking about. Just off the top of my head, but I'm sure you guys will figure it out. But to be able to have like 48 gallons in one tank, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So we've got the ACGB, the 48-gallon, and the Revel, and like when John and I went to the Flagstaff show, we drove straight from here at the shop straight to Flagstaff. Didn't stop one time and could have drove most of the way back
Yeah.
without filling up too.
Yeah.
So that kind of range is pretty awesome.
Well, I have one more question before you move on. The water system, I know you guys do a water system. Has there been any talk about doing a hybrid system, like 12 gallons diesel, 12 gallons fresh water? And if not, let's get into that, and let's. What do I got to do to get into to be partner on that one?
Talk to Jesus.
Yeah, you don't want to cross contaminate. Yeah. Well, if you make it separate and have two different pump systems, we'll talk offline. I have ideas.
That's how the 28-gallon tank got made. I mean,
Yeah.
just persistence from people like, no, this is it. And then, like for some people, they just need a little bit more water and a little bit more fuel. They don't need a lot more fuel and a lot more water. So
Yeah.
you're right. It makes sense.
Well, there's the big debate on the Facebook group is, should I get the auxiliary fuel tank or should I get the water?
Yeah.
And people who get the water say, I never have needed to get fuel before. And then vice versa. I know that having the fuel saved my bacon a couple times. And it was really nice going down to Baja because we went down to San Felipe. I filled that bad boy up, and then with number 2 diesel, because I don't know what they got going on down there. Correct me if I'm wrong, but from my understanding, the versions that the VS30 and backwards can handle the diesel down in Mexico, but the new VS30s can't because of the emission system. Well, I mean, when I say can't handle it, I mean it's not that great.
So for the longest time, there was no low sulfur fuel was available down to Guerrero Negro, which for people's information is halfway down. And then down in La Paz, kind of up towards Guerrero Negro, which would have been towns below Guerrero Negro, they were getting fuel from the mainland. I believe.
What does that mean, the mainland?
They were getting non-low sulfur fuel.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but now there's Costco down there. There's low sulfur fuel everywhere.
Okay.
So as far as I know, and we have, and everybody can debate all they want. We have frickin' customers that go down there and buy, and they live down there with sprinters, and they run fine.
Okay.
We just had a customer ship one of those new Recons by Pleasureway down to Mexico, and he goes, "Yeah, all my neighbors have sprinters. They all have brand new sprinters, and they live in La Paz area, and they just hang out at the beach."
Nice.
Living
the life.
Living the life.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then if in some cases, if you do, like in the old days, when it wasn't that long ago, but you'd go down there, you couldn't buy fuel at the gas stations all the time. They would run out of fuel, and primarily that was a PMEX, which was government run. And now fuel's been opened up, so now you got Chevrons and all that. So you should be pretty good. Just make sure you use the what are they? They're green now, or no, they're green. I forget. The diesel's a different color in Mexico.
The ones that we went to in the Chevron, the handle was black.
Yeah,
But
which
it
is
was
gas up here.
It was separate.
Yeah.
From all the other.
Yeah,
gas
they're typically in the back.
Yeah.
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 I became really good friends with a guy that in Mexico we were fueling up, and he pumped like 60 gallons of gas into his 7.3 diesel, and we had to dump all of it out.
That sounds like a
And
nightmare.
It was a mess. Yeah, but we became friends, and we actually went up and down the coast. So when you're down there, you get the gas. It's normally in the back of the station, and it's a black one, and the gas is green. So opposite of here.
Yeah, right? Yeah, tricky.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, that's good. Well, speaking of that trip that you just went on, I know with there's been a lot of these overland trips, overland tours. I mean, obviously the Storyteller community of owners is huge on those, and we've participated in a few of those themselves, but it seems like education's been a big part of a lot of these trips lately. So I know recovery, and we were talking offline earlier, and you were saying that, with all the advancements and, suspension and people just realizing how capable these vans are, they're starting to push them and take them places they wouldn't before. What are some of the products that or parts that people are most curious about? I know like winching's a big one, is onboard air system, stuff like that. Yeah,
if you want to get into like the heavy, I use this term very loosely, but the heavy overlanding, expeditions, if for lack of better terms. People are super interested in winches, first thing that I've seen trend-wise is that everyone gets the suspension. And then usually they put some type of tint on the window because they find out that it's a big magnifying glass going down the road, right?
Suspension, then tint.
Yeah, basically. And then, after that, it's kind of like storage solutions. And then they kind of fill it out. And then, I would say within 3 to 6 months, they'll go on a trip or two. And depending on what they do, they kind of like, oh, okay, I know this product exists, and now I see a need for it.
Yeah.
And then they'll go ahead and move it. And so going off of what you're saying is that when that progression happens and they venture farther and farther and farther away from the main road, it gets a little bit more scarier. And I've been in that position myself. So confidence in your equipment is paramount, I think, and your skills of driving. And so any tool that you can any tool that you can use to be able to help you get unstuck, especially if you're by yourself, I think is mandatory. So for instance, ironically, I did the Grand Junction, the Beyond Pavement 2021 that Storyteller and Warner Vans did over in Grand Junction last month. And then sure as shit, I'm driving back to Denver, and I stopped by this reservoir to let Kimchi out, and I was going to take a break. And I saw this small SUV stuck in the mud. So I learned from the course that they had a tow strap. But I learned from the course you want to back up and use your torque going forward, not backwards. So as I was backing up, I ended up getting stuck myself. I didn't have any max tracks. I didn't have anything. And so, from that course, what I learned was one is just breathe, right? And then think clearly and calm. And then luckily I had a bunch of rocks. And so what I did is I dug myself out, which I didn't have a shovel, by the way. I didn't have anything.
Oh.
Recovery gear, I had nothing. So
Kimchi can dig.
yeah, and then I got to wash them afterwards. But yeah, and then so I dug myself out. I stuck a bunch of rocks underneath the rear tires. And eventually after 30 minutes, I got out. And sounds really mean, but I was like, see ya, and I was like, out. Because these guys were literally their front fender was up to the grill was in mud, and I was like, there's no way that I'm gonna be able to get them out anyways. But anyways, and then and even in Baja, we helped a gentleman who's driving a truck, get out of the sand too. So, well, Paul did, I didn't, I just watched, but but yeah, so to go off of what you're asking, I think everyone's starting to venture out a little bit more in regards to mods, and they want that recovery gear stuff. And so I'm pretty sure you have one thing that I saw earlier that I really liked that I actually wanted to talk to you guys about, but maybe I'll do it now. But basically, you put a winch in the factory bumper.
Yeah.
And then, so because my thing is either the bumper is too small or it's too big. I'm not going to name companies, but that's what I see. So I kind of like the stock thing and still being able to have, that sleek design. Plus it's less weight, and in my case, almost every ounce matters. And so anyways, I don't know if you want to talk about that, but
yeah. So yeah, what you're referring to is the hidden winch. When did you make the first one of those, John? Because
2017, I think 2017. Yeah, late 2017. Glenn fabbed one up in the shop for a customer, and the guy would not let us. He would not pick up his Sprinter until we made one. And he was he ended up being the coolest guy. He was from New York, and it was a sportsmobile. And he literally goes, "No, you guys are going to make me I'm like, dude, I don't want to make you And luckily, there was a company around the corner that did. It was an Australian company that they had one of the techs that used to work for ARB give us some advice. So it was pretty cool, But yeah, it was a long time ago.
But yeah, we take basically take that front bumper skin off. We've got a hidden winch mount bumper. It's a plate and all nicely welded up and fabbed. And Glenn made the original design, like John said. But when it's installed, basically the only thing that sticks out from the vehicle is just the fair lead. You can't really see any of it. It all sits behind the grill. We've got to trim some of the plastics of the bumper, and so that's been in existence since 2017.
Does that mess with the sensors?
Yeah.
No, on the 2019, you have to from the VS30 You have to relocate the adaptive cruise sensor, and that's about it.
Okay.
We got a little box that's adjustable. There can be a little tricky to adjust. It's a little bit of a technical install because we have to relocate the cooler, the transmission cooler on the VS30, so it becomes not an easy install. And Glenn wasn't thinking about that at the time, but actually because it was we kind of modified the earlier one, which didn't have the tranny cooler, which was never a problem. But we've done a tremendous amount of them, and then we've got the new one, which we've made it easier to install, but it sticks out, so it kind of looks like a.
But using the
Batlet.
stock bumper still, though.
So it uses the stock bumper.
Okay. What kind of winch do you guys put in that?
12,000 pound Warren, either the VR12 or the Xenon 12.
Okay.
So you kind of want to run, you can, if you had to, you can get away with a 10, but ultimately you want to run a 12 on one of these sprinters.
Right.
So.
Okay. Well, where does it? I don't understand how it just doesn't fall off when you try to winch yourself out. What's it attached to?
So it's attached to the chassis in the front, and then the hidden winch actually has mounts that go down, and we tie into the skid plate underneath, and so it's pulling off of the subframe underneath the engine subframe. You're probably not going to pull it off. The more concern from the winch manufacturers, like both Warren and ARB, because Warren really likes our newest winch that we came out with, and they want to make sure that our lower plate for mounting the winch, they're more concerned about the winch itself, where it's mounted to the plate, that bends more than the frames, believe it or not. That's according to them. So
Interesting.
Yeah, which I found interesting too. So he says that usually that's where they will bend, and you'd see that a lot on Jeeps.
Yeah.
They build like a channel bumper, and it just like, but they look cool.
Yeah, right. It's all about looking cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like the winch, like it comes a complete kit. So yeah, like John said, we use the skid plate that reinforces the front. It ties to both of the kind of frame horns on the front of it, and then the newest product that we have now, our new winch bumper, which is called the Telluride.
Based out of Colorado?
Yes.
Nice.
Inspired because John took the prototype on a nice long trip, the 2-week trip between the Revel Rally and Overland Expo. So he did quite a bit of exploring out there. But the new one simplifies the install. Now it's just kind of just 2 big cuts in the bumper, and it just kind of looks like you place the winch right in there, and then we've got a light bar that integrates with it that you can you can run the light bar separately, but it's a real sturdy mount for some Baja Design LP9s that mounts that nice frame horn there too. So it gives it a ruggedized look, but still fits the body lines on the Sprinter. So if you look at it at a glance, you might not even notice it's there.
Right. That's cool. So what else can you guys do? This is like, I feel like a kid in a candy shop all over again,
What else do we have? So the big brake kit, that's definitely been a big one over the last year and a half. Yeah. John worked with Alcon in the UK on that one, making a Sprinter specific heavy duty brake kit.
How many pistons does that have?
So 6 piston front, 4 piston rear.
Okay.
And it uses
what's a stock in the rear too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Both wheels get two more pistons.
Okay.
Yeah. And the it's a significant upgrade even on the VS30 chassis, and it's we build in the improved offset that we want, which is 16 millimeters additional offset in it. That's built in, so you don't have to run wheel spacers. And then we bring in our studs in now from a OE manufacturer in Italy, weird, like big companies like them, they haven't missed a beat at all shipping us parts. It's been really good. So, but the brakes have been really good. We also have a new front brake only, which is primarily used with the ones that have the electronic emergency brake in the rear, which you won't have on any of the modes.
Right.
So, but these are an iron caliper. They're designed for armored vehicles. So Alcon's a big supplier of brakes. They do military. They do OE. They're a big company, and they would not let us put an aluminum caliper on this. There's no way in heck would we put an aluminum caliper on theirs. So they work fantastic.
Cool.
What else do we have? I mean, that's most of the parts that are kind of out there in existence now. And then I definitely, at Overland Expo, we debuted the ARB rear air locker for the Sprinter, which is that's been a couple years in development, and that's the first locking differential for the Sprinter. So yeah, I'll let John kind of take the lead on that. That's been his baby.
Before you start talking or answering that question, I got some questions that hopefully you can weave into the answer. The first one is, why would anyone want that? 2, what difference when you overland will you get? And 3, are there any negative side effects of installing something like that into the Sprinter, considering it wasn't the original part of the original design?
Negative side effects and everything.
Negative? 100% positive.
None of this stuff. We don't need any of this. We want it.
Yeah, right. That's true.
So, well, like Elikem was saying, we announced it at Overland Expo, and we just did kind of like, it's really been a soft announcement. We'll have them probably in January. They're doing their production run in December. We should have lockers here. We currently have a working system in the shop van. We've also had to work with a gear supplier over in Europe. We've got thousands of miles on 2 sets of gears, not just 1 set, because the gears were more important. ARB would not build a locker unless we could actually get gears that worked. So we've partnered with a company that's we've got an exclusive agreement with them for the U.S. distribution of their gears for the Sprinter. We've got the 392, which is stock in the 4-wheel drives. We've got 12-ish. Because ideally you need to match your gears front to rear. You want to match them front to rear, even with the transfer case that we've got. Even Mercedes does it. So when they go, there's some factory 412 ratios out there, or 411. I forget the exact number, but it's right in that area. So we have that, and then we've also got a 430 gear available. Those will primarily be used in the 2-wheel drives. We've got a lot of inquiries on the 2-wheel drives. So. Is it needed if you put it in, say, a 2-wheel drive Sprinter? You're going to create like this little animal, because that 2-wheel drive Sprinter, it has this traction control that's braking as you get wheel slip in a tire. The brake's going to be applied. And then most of the customers that I've talked to that have been successful at driving off-road, they go, you got to kind of like drive it like you stole it. So when you don't let off the gas when it's doing that, because it's trying to brake. And if you let off the gas when you flinch, kind of like, what's it doing? And then you lose momentum. They say you just kind of keep your foot down and keep the system working. It's applying the brake. That when you apply brake with an open differential, it'll transfer the traction to the side that has traction. Right. So when you start losing traction, it starts spinning the tire, then you apply the brake. Now, if you put a locker in there, both tires think they're going down the freeway. They don't know they're slipping. They'll never know they're slipping. You get pure traction. So literally you can take a Sprinter and with the traction control on in 2-wheel drive, step on the gas, and if it won't go forward, you'll burn the tires all the way. They'll dig a hole down to the ground with pure traction on both tires. But if you drive it correctly, you'll be able to you'll have just perfect traction. So we're kind of, in this case, we're kind of faking out the traction control. Now, one of the drawbacks in the 4-wheel drive is that there can be situations where if you lose traction in the front, now your center transfer case is going to work like an open differential, and it will not apply power to the rear. So it's going to be tricky for people. Not everybody's going to need this, not everybody's going to want this, but eventually they're going to find, with all the other things, the other improvements that we have coming for more traction devices, that with the proper transfer case, the proper rear locker, we're going to be able to get further into areas that before you would just sit there and, sometimes it's as simple as gatekeepers. I've seen people stuck on the side of the road, and you're literally like, what happened? I got stuck. And they're literally like, my Ford van would drive through it in 2-wheel drive with a Detroit locker in it. Just because the way that the Sprinters are, their frames are extremely stiff, or their unibodies are extremely stiff, versus a pickup truck where the pickup truck frame and body allows to articulate. They just don't. So they can lose traction really fast. But even our TTBs, like it was real popular for people to come in. We would put in ARB lockers in the rear all the time, even with four-wheel drives. And then we had a 50-50 transfer case. So we had a real transfer case in our Fords, and we'd still put lockers in them. And these people, they're not doing the Rubicon Trail, but you could just drive that thing places that were cool.
Yeah.
You know, get off the beaten path.
Yeah, and I think for like because I just started really learning a lot more about this, especially with our partnership with ARB on the locker, when it's needed, how it works. So for someone who has no idea what it is or why they would need it, basically an open differential, you've kind of got three on the Sprinter. In the rear, you've got one in the center, and then in the front. And so what happens is anytime that a wheel, let's say, gets lifted or loses traction, the drivetrain sends power to the wheel with least resistance, which would be the wheel that's spinning. And that's not what you want. You want to send it to the wheels that have resistance, that are on the ground. So by adding a locker to the rear, now you eliminate the ability for one wheel to start spinning faster than the other in the back. So if you're on something loose or trying to climb something, it keeps the power. And then now what we're finding out is, or what we found out is, how that relationship works as far as sending power front to rear. So now if you have both rear wheels are stuck, or by stuck I mean planted, and one of the front wheels gets lifted or something like that, is the Sprinter going to send the power to the rear wheels, which are locked, or does it send them to the front wheel, which might be sitting in the air, and then you're still not having the momentum to be able to climb out of what you're doing. So, the rear locker eliminates that side-to-side spinning in the rear, and then kind of some of the stuff we're working on moving forward will address some of the other situations that might cause you to get stuck.
Right. So how far out are you from actually starting to install these? When's it come out of beta?
So we have appointments set up for February, I believe. We should have everything here. We're going to have a cool diff cover to replace the diff cover so that you won't have to put on a heavier skid plate too, because a lot of people are just damaging the tin plate that's on there. The rear axle is pretty robust. We'll have a nice diff cover. We'll have the ARB. We'll have the locker. We'll have the ARB locker. We'll have the gear sets. We'll have all the bearings. All the bearings will be the same bearings that's being used by Mercedes. This part is made for a Mercedes. It's not something that we just adapted to it. We worked with ARB for a long time. We shipped them parts. They shipped us parts. And we'd take measurements here on a rear axle that I was acquired.
Am I asking questions?
Yeah, no. And because if you tear up a ring and pinion in a Sprinter, which is how we got this one, Mercedes replaces the whole rear axle. Like there's no information out there to what you torque things to. They just like, why would we need to know? We're replacing the whole axle, and it's $6,000 for a rear axle. So don't break your rear axle.
Yeah, that's a good tip. Expensive.
But ARB's a top-notch company. They're proven off-road and racing, king of the hammers. They make a legitimate. They went away from a 3-piece unit. They've been running their 2-piece billet housing forever. Originally, they had a 3-piece unit way back in the day, and they broke like crazy. They've been around, so it's not like they're not making something new. This is just another application for them. So it's not something that they don't do.
Right.
It's just a fitment, you know. So it's been great working with them, like I said, like Elikem said, we'll have more. You mentioned downsides. There's a downside to anything. Anytime somebody goes in and takes something apart, you're requiring. It's going to be a very technical install, so it's going to require training. It's for a gear guy. It's not rocket science. It's nothing new. It's just, and you could have that right now. There's guys with Jeeps. They go out and they buy brand new Jeeps and they change out the gears. It's pretty common.
Yeah. I used to have a Jeep, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So this isn't something new. It's just, it might be scary for some people, but if you had a Jeep and you put big tires on it, you changed your gears. It was pretty common.
Yeah. You kind of had to.
Yeah. And then, if in this case we're not able to change the gear ratios, if we decide to work on the front gear ratios, which they've offered to do, that might be something, but more than likely just a better transfer case with lower range, because the low range in the Sprinter is 1.4. That's like nothing. You want like a 3-to-1.
Yeah.
So once you get into a 3-to-1 ratio, it'll climb like a goat, and with traction, it'll be great.
So I've made a couple of predictions. None of them have come out to actually fruition, but I'm going to make a prediction right now. So when I had Kate and Joe Russo on the podcast, I thought they were making the Russo Edition Beast or Russo Edition Storyteller. I was wrong, but it's beside the point. So I'm going to make a prediction, and I'm going to say there's going to be a Storyteller Ultimate Beast that comes with a diff locker.
Could be.
Pre-installed.
Could be.
Yeah. So you heard it here first.
We'll just have to see how the new all-wheel drive Sprinter is, right?
Oh, God. Yeah, let's not even talk about that. Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast, to be honest. But yeah, so I think we covered just about everything. I have a couple more questions. Elikem, so I'm curious. You're the marketing manager for Agile. So what's your background? How did you do it? And then my last question for you, I know that's a series of questions, but the last one is, since you've been working here, what's the biggest thing that you've learned?
Okay, so yeah, let's start. I started with Agile, I think 2016 or I think it was 2017.
Not officially.
Yeah, unofficially. Yeah, I was.
Unofficially.
Yeah,
1099.
Yeah, I was working at a marketing agency in San Diego. I moved here from Detroit, so Detroit's the Motor City. So everybody's into cars. Everybody's dad, grandpa has a race car in their garage. So that's just all I grew up around. Were a lot of street cars, muscle cars, things like that. Moved to San Diego. I started working at a digital agency. That's kind of something I did as a hobby throughout college, working with small businesses, working on their marketing, social media, websites. So that's kind of what I fell into career-wise. But I just didn't like the customers I was working with, the clients I was working with at the agency. So quit one day. And then I was like, what do I do now? So I met John through another client of mine, which is a mountain bike shop, and I wanted to work there full time. And the guy said, "Hey, I can't have you full time, but I know another guy that needs a website that's kind of in the same industry." And that's how I met John. And so I started working with Agile, freelancing, working on their website here and there, and kind of building out the e-commerce store. And then I think 2 years ago, I came on full time officially, and just been kind of growing with them since there.
He'll work out.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he's still here. So.
Yeah, I'm still here. As far as like some of the things that have been really most impressive, even with kind of this automotive background, I didn't realize how easy and how hard it was to make something. Like to watch Glenn, Jesus, John just kind of get together and like come up with something like the winch plate, where, seeing them with, cut up pieces of manila folder and taping stuff together, and then seeing it become a tack welded piece of metal that they're cutting out on the plasma cutter in the back, and then that eventually becoming a full-fledged, not mass produced, but a pretty frequently manufactured part. They can do it, and they make it look really, really easy, but then you also see the back end side of it when it's sourcing materials and the actual engineering behind it and testing it and stuff like that. So that's been kind of the most eye-opening and impressive thing about working here. And then these guys really, really do it. So, they've got tons of knowledge to pass on, whether you're an overlander or a consumer, or, someone like me that's, an employee and wants to learn more about the business and just the back end of how things get done. They've been really, really great teachers of all of that. So, and it's a really cool place to work. So,
yeah, cool.
We're trying to retain people. We've got benefits now. We've got 401k. We do incentives for the guys. Nobody's on commission. We're not forcing anybody to do anything, but it's been tough. And with COVID, it's hard finding people. And then once you find somebody and you train them, we want to retain them. So
yeah.
We're gonna have a great Christmas party this year. Thank goodness.
Am I invited?
So, if you want,
I'm just joking.
You can. No,
I'm just joking.
We have the whole restaurant. It's a small place, though.
You don't want me to come? I'll crash the party. Trust me.
That'd be fine. Yeah, you're officially invited.
No, I'm just joking. Well, that's good. I mean, having a good employee atmosphere and climate is super important for retention. I was talking with someone else, I won't name names, but essentially it's really hard to find qualified people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on. It's so weird, but
And we you know, we're good at training. People think they come here and they think like, oh, I can do this, and then they come here and they're like, wow, I didn't know that. I thought I knew a lot, and then they find like some of the basic stuff that we're doing. It's a lot more technical than they thought.
yeah.
You know, so but our dealers, like the dealers that we have, we've got great dealers across the country. You know, we've got guys on the East Coast, a lot of dealers up in Colorado, Pacific Northwest. And you can tell the guys that are just crushing it. They're the guys that get it. You could see that some of the guys I tell them, I go, you remind me of me when you were, like, you work so freaking hard. Like, you know, they work harder than I do today. Mm-hmm. And I picture myself like when I was doing it. Yeah. You can see they're passionate about it. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they're passionate about kind of the whole deal too.
Yeah.
You know? So
it's what it takes to be in this business.
Yeah.
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 So I have 3 questions for you, John. The first one is where do you see Agile in 5 years?
Answer them as you go.
What's that?
Answer them as you go.
Oh.
I think that we'll have, in 5 years, we'll probably have the shop here doing installs and innovating and building parts. And then we'll have more of a wholesale distribution. You know, dealers around, we support our dealers. Like we're not interested in opening up shops in dealers' backyards. We want to grow dealers in areas where they know and where they live, and help them to succeed. Mm-hmm. So getting maybe a little bit more in design. We're working really well with a lot of the suppliers out there, the main companies. You know, there's companies that are coming to us for like, you know, why are you doing this? What are you doing? And, you know, potentially we could even help them develop parts.
That'd be cool.
So it would be neat, you know, when you have somebody come in and, you know, I saw this at Fox. It's a huge company, but they could do so cool things if you left certain people alone. Mm. And you don't see that in big companies. And as all these companies are getting swallowed up, they need people to innovate. So continuing to innovate, run with scissors, so to speak, you know, in your hands, and try things that nobody else would do. You know, I think we've kind of proven that on certain areas, and become successful and help people with solving their issues, you know, helping them with their problems. Most people don't, you know, a lot of people come here for suspension, but so many people come here with just overweight, heavy vans. Mm-hmm. And when we solve that for them, they love their van even more.
Yeah.
You know, they do.
Yeah, I'm one of them.
Yeah. So, you know, you spend a lot of money on these things, and then you drive it, and you're like, gosh, now I got to drive it? I just want to live in it.
Yeah. Right? So my second to last question is, since you're one of the founders, and after hearing your story of losing, you know, basically one of your best friends, and growing and expanding and hearing what you guys want to do in the next 5 years, my question is, what's the number one thing that you've learned about yourself? I need to work at it better, but I've become more patient. I've been a very impatient person. I tell somebody to do something, fucking do it now. Mm-hmm. Like, don't, like I may tell them, yeah, it's no big rush, but get this done. I come back, I'll check them in 5 minutes, right? You know, like, really? Right.
You know, and so I think that my patience with, you know, sometimes with suppliers too, you know, just work with them, not pushing them too hard, letting them know that we're part of a team. You know, we're going to succeed together, whether it's an employee, a friend, family, all that, you know. And I'm not perfect, but I think that I could do better at it. But I think that I've become more patient. And now the crew here, I can leave, I come back, I still have my problems that I have to deal with, you know, in my emails and all that stuff, and I keep that stuff aside. And but I know that the team here is, you know, they're running the show. Where before I felt like, oh, fuck, I can't go. You know, toilet paper's not going to get changed. No. You know, but, you know, it's like, it's a good feeling now. Like, you know, so building that up, you know, I'm 58. So and the more I go out in my Sprinter, I enjoy it. You know, I mean, I'm so jealous of all these customers that come in. You know, they're like, yeah, I'm doing this. I'm working from there. I'm a consultant. You're like, fuck. I'm like, really? You know? So, you know, that's where I see me. I don't know about Agile, but I'd love to be just,
Well,
you know.
it was a personal question, so.
Yeah. No, being patient.
Yeah, that's a good lesson. You're actually not the first person who's answered patience too, so, especially in COVID times. So my last question, and this is directed to you too as well, Elikem, but what does it mean for you guys to be part of the Stonation family?
For me, I love it. I mean, no, you know, not that I'm not a social media guy, so I'm not. Matter of fact, I've kind of checked out on a lot of that stuff, but I enjoy the customers. I enjoy the like-mindedness. You know, I mean, you know, we went out on one of these runs where they take all these sprinters out, and there was like 45 vehicles. I don't think I took one picture. Maybe I think I took one or two pictures, right? And I'm just like hanging out, you know, talking with people. They know me, so that sometimes the business, you know, they want to talk business, which is cool. But other than that, I want to hear about, like, where are we going next? You know, so that I love. And there's like, I see a lot of storytellers out there being used, you know, and we see a lot of them come in here in the shop, but they pretty much like, how soon can I get it back? You know, like, you know, it's not a project. This is my deal. So.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think that's the main part of it, is that the storyteller owner base, the Stone Nation, seems really cool. They're really active, a lot more like-minded to myself. I'm only 30, and I'm kind of just getting into this kind of overlanding and just kind of off-road world. And the community's super welcoming, and like John said, I mean, a lot of the same interests. If you want to go hang out, you want to camp, you want to mountain bike, checking out really cool places, getting really off grid, are some of the things that I'm really starting to resonate with that storyteller group. And then from the marketing perspective, I mean, you guys are really fun to engage with online. You're active, you're communicative. The people that I've met at Storyteller, the company, have been really, really cool to work with as well too. So just really good vibes from everybody I've come across all around.
Awesome. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for your time, because I know we're after hours right now. So, but
Yeah, it's all good.
I'm glad that we redid it. I think we touched on some good stuff, to be honest. And but yeah, and the whole reason why I'm here is because I got the steel braided lines for the ARB compressor.
That's right. We forgot one thing.
Yeah, but anyways, I'll make another short video on that, so we don't have to, recap on that. But yeah, no, you guys are doing great stuff, and I know the community loves you guys, and keep doing what you're doing. As Joe Dirt said, keep on keeping on.
Cool. Well, thank you.
Stonation is a production of Park Media. The executive producer is Younghwa Kim. The audio engineer is
Stephen Grasso.
The marketing director is
Guillaume Golson.
The original music and artist is done by
Jason Wallsmith.
The sound designer is
Lorenzo Interiano.
And the webmaster is
Peng Shu.
Without any of these people, this podcast couldn't happen, so a big, huge thank you. And a big, huge thank you to you, the listener. If you like this episode, please don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a 5-star review. This is Younghwa with Stonation, and I can't wait to share the road with you.